In this video with the AnKing, I'm going to go over how to get involved in and publish research. And this will be focused mostly for pre-medical and medical students, just because that's what I've been through. But I'm going to try and tailor it so that it really applies to anybody who wants to publish research. We have an entire team of people. Most of us have all published research, and we are happy to advise you on that and provide tips and tricks on our social media channels. Lots of resources here to hopefully help you in your journey. And as a disclaimer for this, research is a massive topic. There's really no way for me to cover everything and how to fill out an IRB and how to publish it in different journals. And, every specialty within medicine is different, and medicine is very different from, if you're doing clinical medicine or bench research, and this is a huge project. So if you're doing like a PhD thesis or something like this, this is maybe not for you. But if you're a medical student or an undergraduate student, you want to know how to get involved in research, how to start your first paper and get that all the way to submission. This is basically what I tailored this video for. I have provided some downloadable content. If you go to our website, there's a tab for downloadables, and there's 3 things here that I will show later in the video. Hopefully it will be helpful for you just to kind of give you a template and help get you started. These are a bunch of my publications. So from undergraduate and then through medical school, these were the publications that I put on my application to residency. Now I'm still working on research and hope to publish more, but I just wanted to give you an idea of like what I've been able to accomplish through this method, and I will actually show you real examples from mentors that I have worked with. I also have 11 poster presentations, some oral presentations, and then 1 peer-reviewed online journal that's not otherwise listed on here. So the timeline, if you're a pre-medical or medical student, I wanted to go over kind of like what a timeline looks for you when you should be involved in research. Before you go to medical school, you should be working on as much as you can, because everything that you do in your undergraduate degree can still go on your residency application, which I think is really cool. And research at any point in your life is very helpful, both for helping the community and the research community as a whole, but also just in helping you understand how this works and then being able to better interpret other people's research. You have a lot more free time before medical school, so this is a great time to get involved in research, and I would recommend doing as much as you can. During your first year of medical school, this is when I got started in research. So I started, it was about September of my first year. I started school in August. I knew that I wanted to go into more competitive specialties. I wanted to be more involved in research. And so I started reaching out around then and got involved very early in my first semester. Now, if you're looking at competitive specialties, especially with step 1 and step 2 moving towards pass-fail, I would highly recommend you start doing research during your first year. And that's because you have a lot more free time during your first year. But for many of you, especially if you're just like, I want to do one project, I want to get my feet wet, I'm not sure what I want to do yet, I think probably towards the end of your first year, during the summer between first and second year, is a very appropriate time to get involved in research. There's usually a lot of sponsored projects going on around then. You a lot of times have a summer break. It kind of depends on what your curriculum looks like, but that's generally a good time to get involved. During your second year, again, I would still recommend working on this quite a bit. And the reason for that is during your first 2 years of medical school, you have a lot of time. But also, it takes a long time to get a paper from the idea to actually getting started, to collecting the data, and then analyzing the data, and then publishing it. It takes a long time, many times years. And so I would recommend getting started early so that by the time you apply to residency, you actually have a publication as opposed to something that's just in the works. During your third year, it's going to be very difficult to start research projects. The only thing you really will be able to start then is case reports and things like that on patients that are simpler. It's going to be very difficult to start a project, especially if you want to get it all the way to completion by the time you apply, which is around the very beginning of your 4th year. So that's what I would recommend. And then during your 4th year, of course, same as your 3rd year, you really should be submitting the research that you started during your 1st and 2nd years if it hasn't been submitted already. And for those of you that are applying to residency, everything on your application shows up as either published, but it might also show up as you can put it in there as submitted. So if you submit it the day before, and there are some people who will say even if it's not a great paper, but if you submit it the day before, you can put that on your application. So just to give you a general sense of the timeline. So how where do you start? How do you get involved in this? Who do you talk to? The first thing I would recommend is find a mentor, or whoever the head mentor is for a department. So I was interested in dermatology, and there was one person who was kind of the main contact or liaison for medical students. So I went and talked with them and said, who else in the department has research going on, who should I speak to, that kind of thing. That's usually a good first place to start. If there's somebody who kind of helps medical students get involved in research, that's where I would start. Same with undergraduate. Just ask around. You'll be surprised. It's not that hard to find this person. Cold emails are also totally appropriate. There's been many cold emails that I have sent where I just find their email. I look at the type of research they're doing. I'm interested in doing that type of research. I send them an email. I tell them who I am, why I'm interested, and ask if they have any projects that I could join them on. That's totally appropriate. I'm going to show you a couple examples that I sent during my first year of medical school. Find who the research people are in the department. Whatever it is that you're interested in. So when I was an undergraduate, I was in neuroscience, and then in medical school, like I said, I was interested in dermatology. Find out who those people are. It likely is going to be someone who's a PhD in the medical world. MD, PhD is oftentimes a great person to look for, and the reason for that is sometimes they have 2 or 3 days of the week where they're just working on research, and the rest is clinical. Whereas somebody who's primarily clinical may be doing clinical stuff, 4 or 5 days a week, and really only trying to do research a little bit here and there. So having somebody who's doing more research is probably going to have more projects available, more time to help you and mentor you, and that kind of thing. It is okay to work with as many people as you want. You don't have to stick with just one person, but plan on working with people that whoever you're working with is going to be someone that's going to write you a letter of recommendation. They're going to work with you quite a bit, and so I would recommend, trying to stick with 1 or 2 people on a few projects and getting to know them really well. But it is totally okay to branch out, and it's also okay to, if you do an away rotation, work with somebody at a different university, or even if you haven't done an away rotation, it's okay to work with residents. A lot of times they can be good resources, so don't feel like anybody is a bad person to work with. If somebody's willing to take you under their wing and show you how to do this, I would take that and really use it as best as you possibly can. So my first experience when I was trying to get involved in research was as an undergraduate. It was my second year as an undergraduate, and I had heard that there was a professor that had a lot of research projects. I knew that there was a student who actually got credit for doing research and then later got paid, and it was in addiction research, so I was interested in it. I had his class that semester. I walked up to him after class. I said, "Hey, I heard that you're doing a lot of research in addiction medicine. I talked with so-and-so, and they said they really enjoyed it. I was wondering if there's any way I could get involved." It was that simple. I got involved. I did research with him for the next couple of years, and it was fantastic. So that's one way. The second way, this is an experience. I sent a cold email. You can see exactly what I sent here to one of the doctors, and he sent me a thing back that was like, I don't really have anything right now, but I might over the summertime, or I'd be happy to come up with something over the summertime. So I didn't end up working with research. This was about September of my first year. So I didn't actually end up doing anything with him at that time, but I did later, and we actually published a research paper together. He was a fantastic mentor, great researcher, great physician. I did spend some time shadowing him even after sending this email, so there's a lot of ways to kind of get your feet in the door. And then experience 3, this was with someone who was my main mentor, and I sent him an email. I said, "Hey, interested if you had any research." He sent me something back that was like, "Sorry, I'm just too busy. I don't have anything to do." I later got involved in this other project. It's called Bench to Bedside, where you work with engineering students and things like that to kind of actually build a prototype for something that I thought sounded fun. Turns out this doctor was also involved in that. So I emailed him about it later, and he responded back and was like, "Hey, sorry, I was super slammed that week, but I actually do have some projects if you want to work on. Do you want to meet with me this week?" It was awesome. It was super cool, and he and I still chat. He's a fantastic person, an incredible mentor. I wanted to kind of give him a special shout out because pretty much everything I'm showing in this video is because of him taking me under his wing and showing me everything that is involved in the research world. So this is him. He has a LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I would go follow him. And one thing I wanted to give special attention to is he made this website. It's called Medical Secrets Everyone Should Know. It's all about dermatology stuff that, I'm interested in dermatology, but this really is applicable to anyone. You can see the bottom one there is a skincare routine. So it's applicable to everybody, and he's just put it out there for free, wanting to help as many people as possible. Like I said, he's an amazing person, just wants to make the world a better place. So go follow him and support him. He's awesome. Okay, so getting started with research. You found a mentor, you found someone to connect with. The next step really is coming up with an idea, and then you have to have an IRB or approval to do this, and then collect your data, start analyzing the data. That's really the first step. I'm not going to touch on any of this, and the reason being that this world is so vast and IRBs are different at every institution, and ideally whoever your mentor is going to help you through this. Or they may be already in a project and just want you to help with the data collection, and that's your first step in the door. So I'm not going to go over any of this, but the mentors are really going to help you through this, and I think that's an important part in why you should find somebody first. What I do want to go over is types of projects. So what kind of projects can you be involved in? And these ones are more like for beginners, or really if you're a medical student, so you're kind of busy, but you want to be able to work on stuff. You're not going to be leading a clinical trial. So what kind of stuff can you do? A case report or a series? I mentioned this before, especially if you're a third-year medical student and you're in your clinical years, this is great. This is where you see some very rare or like weird presentation of some sort of pathology, and you want to write it up to tell the rest of the world, like, hey, we saw this, and it doesn't look like anybody else has reported it, or maybe only 2 people have reported this before. So we want to write it up just to say like, hey, like we saw it too. And that can be really helpful because it later leads to, case series, and then they can eventually go back and do like case control studies and things like that. So that's what it is. You're basically writing up the patient presentation. You might include pictures. You're going to do that kind of stuff. It's a much quicker sort of thing, but know that sometimes it is more difficult to publish these because there's a lot of them and they are more simple. One thing is chart reviews. And I spent time as a first-year medical student doing chart reviews. So basically, you come up with an idea and you want to go collect data. We wanted to collect data on people who had prescribed Lotrozone. So my mentor was able to work with the hospital, and we got data for a bunch of hospital visits where Lotrozone was prescribed. And then my job was to go back through those and find who was it that prescribed it. Was it an MD? Was it a DO? Was it a PA? And then were they urology? Were they OB-GYN? Was it family med? Was it dermatology? How much did they prescribe? How long did they prescribe it for? What area of the body was it? So I went through the chart note and gathered that data and put it into an Excel sheet. That's a chart review. And then once it's in the Excel sheet, you can go through and do a huge analysis to find out, patterns in that data. Literature reviews is something else that's maybe more difficult, especially if you're not an expert on the topic or something like that, but you can definitely dip your feet in this. This is basically taking all of the research papers on one topic that are out there and reviewing all of them and then kind of putting it into a summary paper. So you're not doing any new research per se, but you're taking a lot of stuff and putting it into one paper that's a quick summary for people to read. And these are very helpful, especially when you need quick access to information. Data analysis is a part of a project that you can be involved in. You might not actually be involved in the rest of the collection and the IRB and things like that, but you can participate in the analysis. And if you do that, that's a way to get your name on a paper. And then first and second author stuff. So this is like where you're the first author or the second author on a paper. You're very involved. You're kind of leading the project in many ways. And this is something that I do think is at least worthwhile as a medical student. Having done it myself a couple times, I thought it was really helpful to take a paper all the way from the beginning to the end, be the one to submit it. It is obviously feels really good when you finally get that paper out there, and then people ask about it in your residency applications, or your interviews. So this is a really good experience for everybody. I would recommend at least one of these, and if you are applying to competitive specialties, then having a few of these is going to look really good. Okay, so actually doing the project, some tips for doing this. One thing I would say is be really efficient. And that means like staying really organized. You want to keep track of all of the references that you can possibly use. Have a really good outline. You want to stay really organized, especially as you start submitting. You might have 5 different copies of the paper because you've submitted it to different places. You're going to be working with multiple people, but you want to be efficient and you want to work fast. Is going to make you look better as a medical student or as an undergraduate student. The people you're working with are going to be very happy with that. Work with others on research projects. Don't try to do it all yourself. That was a mistake I made early on. But find somebody else. So I had a good friend that also applied dermatology with me, and I was first author on a paper, and he was first author on another paper, and we said, hey, let's work together on these. So I ended up being first author on mine and second author on his, and he was first author on his and second author on mine, and we worked together, and we that way we actually got 2 projects, but in roughly the same amount of time. So work together with other people. They're also going to help you get the work done, and you get to see other projects, which is really cool. I would definitely recommend this. Other tips I would recommend is learning statistics. Knowing basic statistics like I listed here are very helpful, especially when you get into complicated analyses. A lot of times universities will have statisticians that you can work with that will do the analyses for you. But I had a friend who was a statistics major in undergraduate, and he had so many research projects because he was able to do the analyses. People wanted him because they knew that he could help with their research projects. He could interpret the statistics, he could write about them and explain them. So that was a really cool thing. And then learning SPSS, which is a statistic, like a data analysis software. This can be really helpful. And you could learn it by getting on YouTube and watching free videos and things like that. I never did for what I was doing, but one of the other co-founders of the AnKing stuff did. He published far more than me, and he learned things like this. So it really is pretty helpful if you want to get really into the research world. Okay, so actually writing the paper. These are a few tips here. After this, I'm actually going to show you all of this stuff. Some example Word documents that I have, the downloadable things, like how to look through all of this. So know that's coming. But identify a journal and read the rules. So where do you want to publish this? What's a journal you want to shoot for? A lot of times you shoot for the really big ones that have a really high index factor early on, and then maybe work your way backwards if it gets rejected from those. But look at what type of article do you want to write? Do you want to write a letter to the editor? Is this original investigation? Is this just commentary on a topic? Is this a case report? Identify that. Look at the journal and see what their rules are, because every journal is different. Some may be 500 word limit, some may be 1,000 word limit. So this is your first step, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. The next thing would be read other similar papers. I would start with that journal, and if you chose a case report, look at case reports in that journal and what people are publishing and what it looks like. That'll give you a good sense, especially if you're new to this, of what it looks like and how you can be more involved in that. And then start background research. You want to start keeping a list of everything that is related to this topic. I think it's a good way to just find out what's out there, what research have people already done. So I made a Word document. I would put a link to the study and then a couple bullet points about what that study was about, or really key facts and figures in that study that I could potentially cite in my paper. I'll show you an example where I kept a list of this, and then use a citation manager is going to save you a lot, so you don't have to format the citation on everything, but also keep track of all of the potentially related things you'll cite in your research paper. And then I think the first place to start, a lot of times starting is the hardest part, and so we're going to keep procrastinating until we've started. Where to start is the title page and the outline. Just get the title page done and then get an outline of the research paper done. This is a huge step, and it actually won't take you that long. Under an hour, you could have this part done. You'll have a great outline, and then you can get started and really get into the nitty gritty. You'll have all of the citations you can reference. You'll have this. It'll be very easy to start writing your abstract and at least the introduction of your research paper, and then you're off to the races at that point. So I want to go show you all of these things and how you actually get involved, so you have an example of this. So we're going to do that now. All right, first step here is figuring out what type of research paper you want to write, what the guidelines are for that. If you look up whatever journal article or whatever journal it is, this is JAMA Dermatology. If you type JAMA Dermatology author guidelines into any Google, something like this will pull up. And finding the proper journals is kind of difficult. I would ask your mentor, which journal should we start with, and they can give you some ideas. But this is, a lot of them look very similar to this. So determine an article type. So you're going to look what is it that I want to do? Is this the type of thing that I do? If so, here's the requirements. You can click on this and actually get more specific requirements. You can see they have all the different article types that are here: consensus statement, images, a viewpoint, letter to the editor, whatever it is. And then look this up. And like I said, every journal has slightly different rules. Sometimes letter to the editors are 600 words and 10 references, whatever, but they have very specific rules here. So this one may be less than or equal to 3 authors, and you may have 4 authors. So that means you need to look for another journal. So that's why I would start with this. And then they do, if you scroll down, they have quite a bit more information here on how do you format things. They want it to format just like this for your abstract. So you would just copy that template over to your Word document and use that. So that's why I recommend this is a very, very good place to start. Once you've determined what you want to do, what journal, what type of article, then go to that journal and look and see. And this is stuff that's just published here. And most of them, you can see free articles if they were just published, or they'll have certain free articles. If not, then you can, a lot of universities will have access to them or something. But you can see when I'm on here, here's an original investigation article, here's an editor's note article, here's a review, here's a research letter, here's a brief report. So you can get a sense if you click on this and see what does a brief report look like, what was published, and go look through, just read 2 examples, just so you get a sense for like what was published. It's also totally appropriate to ask your mentor for an example. If at any point you're like, I don't know how to write a cover letter, like just ask them, hey, do you have an example of a cover letter? Which is really helpful. Now, like I said, on the downloadables of our website, I've actually put a couple examples for formatting research papers and stuff, but don't ever be afraid to ask somebody. Here's an example of a Google Doc where me and another student, we worked and this is how we started getting our background research. So this is a link to a research paper, and here's a couple quick bullets on like what that research paper was about. Here's a link, so we put in information here. We're like, what's going to be really helpful that we could potentially cite in our paper? And you can see that we've listed out a bunch of papers. So this is just a good place to start. Make sure that you're keeping track of the links or the titles or whatever it may be so that you have those safe. And then a really good place is to get this is a manager for citations. You can see here's all of my stuff. So like when I was working on this paper, here's 9 papers that were related to this for the microscope study. Having a citation manager like this is really helpful. There are free ones, there are paid ones, whatever. This was through my university, we were able to get this. So I didn't pay for it. There's probably better ones out there. I believe you can actually download this one and pay for it. But just so you have something. The other reason to do this is so I was able to pull these in. You go to collect and search, and you just search the title of the research paper, which makes it really easy to add them here. And then when I was ready to actually write my paper, I would go to this format bibliography, and I could say like, oh, okay, I want to do the microscope, and I want the style to be, the JAMA style or Vancouver style or a different one. And then I could preview and print, and it would actually pull this up, and you can see it like formats all of those for you so that you can copy them into a Word document, and you might have to change the order around, but at least it's formatted for you. So that's what I would recommend. I think those are really, really helpful. All right, now like I mentioned, we have this on our website here. Here's downloadable content. If you go to this is the playlist of these videos, and then under the research folder, there are 3 documents here. These are examples I basically took actual research papers that I had used and then just deleted all the content and left you with an outline. So this is a example for a cover letter that you're going to send, and it's very simple, but I think it's handy to have a template so that you know what it looks like the first time you do it. This is the example title page. And like I mentioned, getting the title page started is the first step to getting started with the research paper. So put in all of the, the names of everybody, put in their departments. Here's the corresponding author information. You may not actually have these numbers yet, but you just have all of that ready. You've got the keywords, any of the authors, if there's any declarations. And then here's, your abbreviations. And then here's the basically things that I would put in here. A lot of papers want you to put the short title in the top. Here's your abstract format. And like you saw on the JAMA dermatology page, everybody wants their abstract formatted a certain way. So they format it however they want. And then here's generally what I would do for my outline. So I would start with intro, methods, results, discussion, conclusion. This is just examples of what you would put in there. And just bullet points, just get it started. The introduction is probably going to be an easy place to start because that's basically all the background research that you did. But use that as a kind of a guideline. And then here's your reference page. And then this over here is if you submit to a journal and they come back, and sometimes they can say they accept it, they can say they reject it, or they can say, we want you to change some things. If they want you to change some things, this is the format that I used when they wanted me to change things. So I actually put their comments in here, and then I wrote in red, thank you for your suggestion, we made that change. Or, thank you for your suggestion, here's what we did, here's why we did it, we changed the paper accordingly, whatever. You're going to end up doing some of these, and this is really helpful. I found that this template was really handy. I got this from my mentor. I asked, hey, do you have any examples? Sent me this. So I'm passing that on to you, and hopefully that is helpful. Now that you got all of the paper started and things like that, here are tips to shine. The first thing I would do is be on time if you've established a deadline of when you're going to do things, or be early. This is really their first step of seeing, how's this person going to be that I work with. If you are always working really hard, you're getting things to them, things like that, a mentor is going to be more than happy to help you and teach you and things like that. But if they're constantly having to nag you or they're not getting things, they're going to give that project to somebody else, or they're not going to be as inclined to want to give you more projects in the future. get a first draft. Just do it. Just get through the first part. It's painful, but once you have the first draft, it's so much easier. It's easy to change from there and adjust things. And I think a lot of times I had one researcher tell me that they really don't want to do anything until a student has given them a first draft. And then once they see that, they realize, oh, this student's for reals. And then they're willing to start working with them. So that's one person's advice, but I kind of took that to heart. Just get things out there. If you need an example, what does a manuscript look like? What do I need to do? What does a cover letter look like? Go look for examples on the website. Look at the journal like I showed you, or ask your mentor, ask friends. Hey, can I see an example of this? Just once you've seen examples, and you can somewhat replicate that. The other thing, just do your best. If it's your first time doing this, that's okay. It's awesome that you want to get involved in research. I think that's great. Just do your best and you'll improve. Like I said, if you get a first draft to a mentor, they're going to be really excited about that and they'll change it and make it look really good. The first ones I wrote definitely were not how it was when it finally got published. But it was something and it got there and I learned. And as I've gotten more involved in this, I've been able to feel way more confident and I see less changes from other people around me. Too much content is better than too little, I think. If you get a lot of content written in the introduction, you can go back and trim that down. But if you only have 2 sentences, that means whoever you're working with has to come up with more, and they don't want to do that. So if you come up with a bunch of stuff, that's great, and then you can trim it back down. That's what I would recommend. The last thing is submitting the paper. You finally got the paper to the point you want it to be. Everybody feels confident about submitting it. What do? I would put on a lot of submissions from personal experience. I had to submit to many, many journals. And I'll show you that in a second before it finally got accepted. The paper's going to get rejected. That's just how it is, especially if you're doing things that are, large clinical trials with big name people and big universities and 10,000 people. Yeah, of course, that has a much higher likelihood of being published than one case report that you wrote as a medical student. So just recognize that. This is a lot of times the first author, but you may be asked to help with this or whatever it may be. So just as an FYI, if you're applying to residency, I would make sure this is PubMed indexed. There's actually a place on your ERAS application where it wants you to put the PubMed ID. That most journals are, but just keep an eye out for that. So I'm going to go show you how to actually submit the paper and give you an example of that, and then we'll be done. All right, here's an example of one paper. This is one of the first papers I worked on, and how many times I had to submit it. Each of these folders is a submission. So if I click into each of them, you can see what it's like. Each of them was like this. And I would actually recommend doing this and just duplicate that folder whenever you move on to something nice, because sometimes you will take something that was a full 1,000 word document, you cut it down to 500 words to submit it somewhere else, and then maybe later you decide to go submit the 1,000 one. So you want to keep a good history of what's going on. But anyway, that's what all of these are. So to give you a good idea. And then this was the final one, and you can see there was a resubmission and another resubmission. The other thing to recognize is that some places will want you to submit the cover letter separately and all of your tables and images separately. Or some of them want you to just submit one document. So that's why I have multiple folders like this. But as you can see, it got rejected plenty of times before it finally got accepted. Now this isn't how you would submit something. So this is JAMA Dermatology. I just went in like I was going to submit. A lot of times you have to create an account, but it will say, yeah, I'm going to make an original investigation and click continue. That's the type of paper that I want to do. And then we'll go in here. I'll just show you very briefly what it's like. You can see it's like this, and they'll say, okay, I want you to upload all of your files here with your manuscript, with your images, whatever it may be. They want, a lot of times the instructions for the authors, like this over here, will actually tell you what information they want on the title page, stuff like that. So make sure everything looks correct. And then they're going to ask you, we'll skip through this, they're going to want you to put all of your information in, where are you going to submit it? What do you want to do? They're going to ask you to put information in about the authors and look them up with their ORCID ID, which I mentioned earlier, like why it's helpful to have that information early on. And then they're going to ask for subject areas, conflict of interest, yada, yada, yada. You'll finally review things. So it is quite the process. I feel like every time I had to submit, like reformatting things, and then finally submitting all of this and stuff, sometimes would take a couple hours. So just be aware of that. But this is how you get to the final page, and then eventually things get published. And it's really exciting and very rewarding. So hopefully that's helpful. I realize this is a long video. I took everything I had knowledge. I actually asked my mentor for ideas. I asked Forrest, who was one of the AnKing co-founders, for ideas because he published a ton in neurosurgery. So these are very basic, getting the start. Comment below. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on things. We really appreciate your support on our YouTube channel and hope to create more content like this in the future. Thanks for learning with the AnKing. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Patreon. That is at AnKingMed. Also, feel free to reach out via email or check out our website, ankingmed.com, for more tips and tricks.